I could find a single family home, but it almost felt like a waste, I guess, of why do that, of why waste the loan on a small property when I could get a multifamily. Maybe it wasn't as easy to find, but it worked out. I mean, I'm happy with that. And so that was really the focus. It's like, that's the biggest potential I can get with this loan. So let's maximize what I can get out of that loan on a property.
Well, Andrew, thanks for coming to join us. We're here to talk a little bit about your pursuit of freedom, what freedom means to you, and how you're achieving the lifestyle that you really enjoy, and how real estate kind of has impacted that. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this chair.
Sweet. Well, thanks for the invite. Appreciate it. How I got to this chair, boy, I guess working with you, buying my first property in 2021, I guess it was. And that was my first dive into real estate. And I now have two properties, one in Omaha and one in Texas. And it was kind of a random passion that came up that I decided I wanted to get into real estate, wanted to do more with my own finances, have a little bit more control of my finances. And it's been great. I'm almost use the word passion at times because I love it. I enjoy it. And, the idea too of setting up myself, but more importantly, my family for the future. And so it's been a great part of my life. And then the people that it's brought me in touch with as well has also been a huge blessing as well.
And so how did you get into wanting to do real estate? I know you're financially responsible. You did the college thing, got a good job. So how did that lead you into deciding real estate was next?
It was like, it's funny. Literally, I can tell you, it was December 3rd, 2021, I guess it was. So I guess I bought the property, must have been in 2022, that I had this moment at night where I was thinking that I was too comfortable, that I was
playing safe.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And that's how I grew up. It's the classic rich dad, poor dad too, right? Like, I love my parents, but I grew up with poor dad or poor parents, like it was get a good job, save your money, you put it in the bank. There was no talk about like what you could do with that money or how to make it work for you. And I just literally couldn't sleep that night. And there's more to the story too with the relationship I was in and everything as well. But I just started thinking, I was like, there's other aspects of my life where I push myself, like fitness is an area that I've always pushed myself in. And I'm like, why are you not pushing yourself harder in other aspects in the same way that I did that, and knowing that like it takes time, but like it's one step at a time. And it kind of clicked for me. And I was like, well, what would I want to do? I wasn't big into stocks because I didn't like the idea of not having any control. It's at least with real estate, it's a tangible object that I have some control over. So that was my route, and I kind of dove in. And I think you heard this story that I was like, I want a property in 3 months, and just barely didn't meet that goal. But like, I just dove in, started listening to all the podcasts I could and everything. And so it was a way of like pushing myself outside my comfort zone, but also looked at it as I kind of mentioned already, how can I set up myself and my family for the future? After I'm gone or when I'm still around, those things, what can I do to put them in a better place? And again, in a way that I felt at least I had some control. Control is obviously maybe something that we don't all have, or maybe we don't have any control, but at least some control over that and what was being done to set that up for the future.
And to be fair, we missed the date by 2 days because the closing got pushed.
Right.
So we were on track to make it. And then
I remember because you bumped the closing up so we could make it. Yep. And then the delay. Yep.
So before we started, we were talking about College World Series and Airbnbs. Is both your properties, you say you got one here and one in Texas, are they both Airbnbs?
So the property in Omaha is a mix. It's a 4-unit. I have one long-term tenant, and great. I love him. And then I had at first, I lived in one, and then one of them already was a short-term rental.
Okay.
And then the other one was also a long-term rental. So as things shifted, I kept one of the 2 bedrooms. When she moved out, I turned that into a midterm rental.
Okay.
It's 7 minutes from UNMC, so I of course get a lot of healthcare workers. My unit that I was in, after I was done living there, I turned mine into it's a 1-bedroom. I turned that into a midterm rental. And then I kept essentially always running the one as a short term. So it's this mix where mostly midterm rentals, or half of them are midterm rentals, one short term, pure short term, one long term. And during the College World Series, I open them up. I take away my 28-day restriction and open it up, of course, for College World Series fans for those couple weeks, which obviously makes sense and always works out.
Yeah, it's College World Series can be lucrative.
Yeah. And then the Texas house is interesting. Have you heard of Pad Split?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a Pad Split house. So it's rent by room. That came about because the realtor I was working with there, the owner had to move to Florida for a job, didn't want to take the time, knew the realtor, asked him, hey, you got anybody that would be interested, quick, more or less off market. And it was off market. And he knew that I was someone that would be willing to work with the fact there were already roommates there. Okay. So it was a 6-bedroom house. They already had 5 roommates and his room. And he knew, so he contacted me first. He's like, kind of knew that I'd be willing to work with that, where not maybe everyone would. So I was all for it. It worked out great because, again, saved some money being off market. And I just kept rolling with the rent by room. Now, at the time, he just did it on his own, but I then switched into Pad Split to help.
How does Pad Split work? Do they basically sign a master lease with you?
Pretty much, right. So I signed a lease with them that the property will only be used for Pad Split, and then it's individual leases. And essentially, well, the other thing I did is I actually turned an office and a projector TV room into a bedroom. So now I have 8 bedrooms.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a big house. It's 4,000 square foot, big house. There's 6 bedrooms upstairs, 2 bathrooms, and then there's 2 bedrooms downstairs and 2 bathrooms downstairs too. So it works great for that setup. Parking's probably the hardest thing when you have that many people in one house. But Pad Split essentially takes care of all the marketing, and they've really grown, well, in Austin, especially too, with, the cost of living. Like, Austin's so expensive, and rent went up so much, and Austin blew up so much during COVID that there's just so many younger generation, especially, that can't afford, of course, to buy a house. They can't even afford the rent in some places. So it works really well for an option for a cheaper way to live. You give up some things, of course, right? Like you just have your room and it's common spaces and you're sharing a bathroom. It's kind of like a little mini dorm, but with that, you get some cheaper rent, and it's worked great. I mean, Pad Split takes their fair chunk, of course, but, overall, now that I'm a couple years in, well, 1.5 years in with that one, been really happy with it.
Yeah, you don't really have to worry about anything.
Right. Now, the one thing I do, unlike a complete property management, Pad Split doesn't do the maintenance, doesn't take care of any of the issues. So those things still all come to me. So like, they're basically only marketing.
Okay.
So they don't do anything. I have to maintain the house. I have to do all that stuff. So there's a bit of a balance where it's not as easy as just handing over to property management, which of course doesn't mean that you don't have to get involved at all, but I'm still more involved than it would be maybe your typical property management company.
Gotcha.
So I want to talk about when you were going after this first property, you were very intentional with knowing what you wanted. You wanted a multifamily property. There wasn't a whole lot of convincing, of what loan type and stuff. Like, I remember we had conversations about the options of what loans you could go after, but do you want to talk about how you made those decisions and came to the conclusion you wanted a multifamily?
I think it was the idea that, and yeah, I think you're right. We talked about this. Multifamily was the way that I get the most bang for my buck. Like, if I'm going to do an owner occupied loan and, I can go up to 4 units to do that, well, then why wouldn't I use that loan and that cheaper interest rate and the lower down payment to get myself the most doors, I guess we'll say in this case, that I could, or get myself the biggest property or the biggest potential, I guess, in that case. So yeah, because I think we specifically talked about too, I could find a single family home, but it almost felt like a waste, I guess, of why do that, of why waste the loan on a small property when I could get a multifamily. maybe it wasn't as easy to find, but it worked out. And I'm happy with that. And so that was really the focus. It's like, that's the biggest potential I can get with this loan. So let's maximize what I can get out of that loan on a property. And then, hey, I guess bringing back in the Texas house, that's interesting because it's a single family home, but it's really run like multifamily
I'm
too.
about to say 8 bedrooms.
Yes.
That's pretty good there.
Yeah, exactly. And now that was part of rolling, I guess, as I kind of already described with what the market gave me, with Austin being so expensive, it's really hard to cash flow. And it was kind of like, this is probably the only way I'm going to be able to cash flow is if I do something like this where, 8
Plus, you
bedrooms
get the
in one
appreciation
house.
of Austin.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was 100%. I went into Austin when I bought the house there with the mindset, if I break even, I'll be happy. Because I was banking on that. Because, and we've talked about this, I'm a long-term, 10, 20 plus years down the road. I don't care about the quick turnaround. So I was banking on long-term, Austin's going to appreciate. So if I even break even, I'll be happy. And then who knows what, 10, 20 years down the road, or I don't know, longer maybe, but 100% what I was banking on there.
When you were also in a position with your active income where you don't need that money to survive off of, you're not running from your W-2. So you can afford to wait that time.
Right. I think that's what so many investors make the mistake of trying to. I did the same thing, trying to get as much passive income so they can walk away from their active income, if you will, from their job. And it gets you in a bad position, I think.
Right.
Versus just realizing I'm probably always going to need active income. So.
Well, and so from going and making a decision, obviously, we got in contact on Bigger Pockets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we started. And we went after the FHA loan, which is 3.5% down. And then it was rainbows and butterflies after that, right?
Right, exactly. Completely smooth. Yeah, until day before closing. If not, no, I think it was the day before. I don't think it was the day before closing when we learned about. You're going to have to help me remember the clause exactly that your rent has to be. Can you remember it's 75%? How does that work?
Well, so they take 75% of the rental income to increase your debt to income ratio. But then there was a clause in the FHA that none of us were aware of. The lender, I mean, I'd never heard of it before, but something about how 75% of the income from the other 3 units, assuming that you're going to move into one of them, can cover a certain percentage of the mortgage payment. And because of the size property that we went after, it was a $500,000 purchase. The mortgage payment was high enough where he had to put more of a down payment.
Right. And which is one of those things where finding that out right from the start is one thing. Finding out the day before closing was another
After
thing.
the 11th hour.
Yes, exactly.
Is that what pushed closing 2 days?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, pushing that back. In the end, still worth it, of course, 100%, right?
It was
Again,
an extra 20-something thousand.
right.
Yeah.
And again, with looking long term, completely worth it. I had saved up and a lot anyway, so that it's not like it completely drained my account or anything like that. So I could handle it.
So instead of putting 3.5%, you put like 7.5%.
I think so.
Like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically
Did
exactly
the quick
what-
math while we're.
Yeah, there we go. Exactly.
Well, and one thing else.
So somebody can fact check me on the comments.
Yeah.
And one thing I'll say is I remember from our initial conversations, we talked about your strategy. We went through, the Omaha market, and then we got very clear on what you were looking for. And I've talked about this before, but when people say, I just want a deal, like you're looking this big. And when a deal pops through, you're not going to know it. But when you're very clear, I want a fourplex. I want it to be close to the med center and, within X price range. When that deal popped up, how quickly did we take action on it?
That's right. I love telling this story too. So I believe it listed at maybe 4 p.m. and I think you contacted me by 5 because I'm trying to remember if I was even done with work, which would have been off at 4:30. You had contacted me about seeing the property. We must have met at like 6, maybe. And then we had the verbal close, I believe at like 7, because I usually tell people, think from the house actually going live at like, I think 4 p.m. we had a verbal at 7, so like 3 hours, maybe it was 3.5 hours that it took for all of that. So yeah, I'd love telling that story too.
And you offered on it sight unseen. You had not walked the property yet. So I remember that it listed at 4:45. I told you about the property. I think I walked it by like 5. And then by 6 o'clock, I was telling you, this is the one.
Yeah.
Like, and I talked to the agent. I said, if I can get you an offer in the next half hour, can you get him to take action on it? And so we did up the paperwork. He signed everything, sent it over. We had it locked up by 7 o'clock.
Yep.
So
yeah, that's pretty fast for a single family. Okay, I've seen that, but multifamily, it's pretty.
We gave him full asking price. Like it was normal contingencies. It wasn't anything special.
The only thing was FHA.
And and I was standing in front of the house while waiting for her to confirm that they were going to accept it and cancel the other showings. And I remember there was a few other investors that were walking up, and I told them, "Oh, sorry guys."
Yep.
And they got the call from the agent right then and there that it's under contract. And they're like, "You got to be kidding me."
Yeah. I remember because I ran into one of those guys at one of the local investor meetings. He was like, "You're the one that bought that property, aren't you?" And like, I remember seeing him walk up to the door because I did actually get to walk it with you. Yeah. I remember that. And you already had a pamphlet that said Andrew's house. I think I remember, or a binder that was already ready. So, that move. We did have to. I think we did have to give up inspection. That was the one thing. Right. The one contingency, I guess, was we did give that up. But otherwise, an offer at full.
Did you still get it inspected?
Yeah, did get things checked out exactly. But
yeah, just because you waive inspection doesn't mean you can't get it inspected.
Right, exactly.
It just doesn't, not part of the contract.
Which is why I knew, because like we had someone check out the roof. I knew, and we can go into that more too. That's been a story. I knew the roof was probably going to need it. So I kind of was aware. The guy that checked it out just kind of did a brief because it's February, of course, too. I remember it was hard for him to get up there, but I kind of was like, okay, I'm going to be prepared to have to replace the roof. Didn't realize how soon that would happen, but I was prepared to have to replace the roof.
And we underwrote for those kinds of things, leaving a margin of knowing that those things are going to come up and having a budget for them. But I think that led into the next, smooth sailing moment.
Yes.
Facetiously speaking.
Yeah. So, and that also helped for me in my mindset. And again, I had set enough aside that financially I knew, okay, if I have to replace this roof, I have enough to cover it. So I knew that going into it too, and even after the bump in the down payment. So then that was closed in March, and June already had a rainstorm and there's water coming in through the ceiling. And it was like, oh, right. So I guess it's time to take care of this roof now. Sooner than I had hoped. It's always sooner than you hope, I guess, right? Yeah. But still, it was like, all right, well, let's take care of this. And oh boy, it's like, how do I summarize the next 1.5 year process that this took? Basically, I tried to find, different people to do this. Of course, it's my first time now handling a big project like this. So I got a few different bids. I learned a lot from Bigger Pockets about the things to look for and stuff like that. Another big story is my sister. Literally, when I found out about the roof leaking, I was in Omaha because my sister just got admitted to UNMC with a cancer diagnosis. So looking back, I'll say this now before I get into the story more. I don't know if I should use this as an excuse, but I always think my mind was not focused on this. Like I just wanted to get somebody to fix it. Mm-hmm. Like I was like, my sister is my priority right now. But in hindsight, it was one of those almost classic things where I had gotten a couple of bids from bigger companies, which were more expensive, or I had a guy that was kind of a small guy and cheaper. And I thought, gosh, I like the idea of helping small businesses, and I still do. It doesn't taint that. But so I went with him. And it was kind of a nightmare from the start. One of those things like he was hard to get a hold of. I was supposed to meet him one time to do payment and go over everything. And he didn't make it and didn't even contact me ahead of time. And I told him like, that's bad. He had wanted a portion, not all of it paid up front, but a fair portion paid up front. So where I wasn't able to pay him. And then when he didn't show up, I was like, okay, I'm starting to question this already, and I'm not even started yet. And I at least maybe had the know-how to say, all right, I'm now going to pay for all the products. I'm not paying you to buy the product because I didn't trust giving him the money. And so you're going to send me all the payments for that. And I'm only going to pay you in draws. Like, I think we broke it down into quarters. So I paid
For
him
the labor side.
Yes, for the labor. Exactly. So I paid him his labor in quarters, and every time like he had to get product, I made the payment. And so I took care of that part. So it took, it's one of those things. There's so many levels of this that went wrong and so many red flags that looking back, said it would take 2 weeks. It took 6 weeks, I think. Finally got done. He got it done. He started like beginning of October, got it done early November. And it's kind of one of those things, I was just glad to be done with it. Again, I was like, I'm focusing on my sister right now. And I had somebody kind of check over the roof and they said it looked okay. And again, there in hindsight, I'm like, I wish I had had somebody check it closer. So 2 weeks later, get another rain, already have water coming in through the ceiling. So I try to get in touch with him. No surprise, ghosts. Never responded to anything. I tried for a week to get a hold of him. I even reached out to his wife, who was helping at times too, and nothing. So now it's 2 weeks, and I've already got leaking going on. I hired somebody else to go up there and already repair a portion of it that had like pulled back, and they took care of that. And let's see. So here we are, December. I think I was mostly okay, even though I had gotten another company involved at that time too. And they found other things that were not good, just poor work. So even now to this point, I've always known like I'm probably gonna have to replace it again. So then it was, all right, what do I want to do about this? I decided, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to let this happen. I'm not going to let this guy do this to anybody else. I'm going to sue him. So I did. So I found a lawyer. That was a year-long process. I think all of 2023 was the litigation because, of course, he never responded to anything from the courts or anything from the lawyer, or anything like that. So again, no surprise. Never showed up to court. So I won by default. So I did win. But again, lawyers serve a purpose. But as everybody says, it's always more expensive than they tell you it's going to be. And because everything got drawn out, like every email, every call is always a cost. So that took, I literally don't think we got the decision till the next December. So it took basically a year. It did win, but of course there too, it's not like I just get paid. In that case, it's just a lien against his house, which I'll get paid whenever they sell the house one day. We were, I hate to say lucky, because I never wish harm upon anybody, but because his wife was involved and knew, they were able to tie her into the lawsuit, and she's the name on the house. So that's how we were able to put the lien on the house, is because she was also one of the defendants. So I guess bright side, try to look at it.
So was he doing operating business in an LLC or just his personal name?
LLC.
So
Yeah.
they also had to pierce
Yes.
corporate veil just to tie them personally. That's a difficult process to do.
Yeah. And then,
Well, when you don't show up to court to defend yourself, it's probably a little bit easier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, and he had some insurance, which I think, no surprise. I don't think his insurance was current. So that we didn't get any coverage from there. Bright side, I tell myself this now. It was, I'll tell you guys, the settlement, it was like $44,000 at 12% interest. So I'm like, all right, well, 12% interest is pretty good. I'm just going to look at that as an investment.
So you could end up owning his whole house.
Pretty much. Yes.
Like if he doesn't pay this at 12% interest,
yeah,
that compounds pretty quick. Rule 72. I don't even
I'll let you do the math again on that one.
But that's what, less than 6 years, that's going to double.
Yeah. That's good. I hadn't even thought that far ahead on it. I just knew like, okay, well, that's better than I probably could do buying another property, right? Or in stocks. So I'm like, that's the bright side that I'll look at. the hard part is now I'm already having some issues with the roof, and I may need to replace it literally within months. I'm already working on that too.
Yeah.
I don't get the money to pay to do that. I've saved enough up to do it again, but it's just, obviously that's a hard pill to swallow. Like, okay, now I got to pay to do it again. It would be nice to have it to pay it, but I just tell myself, hey, like that's a really good, I'll take that interest rate and that anyway. So
Yeah. Every 7 years, you go, just, hey, my money's doubling.
yeah, yeah. So
It's an
yeah,
asset on
a
your
process.
balance sheet now.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, it technically is.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, that's interesting.
It was a headache in the end, of course, that I would love to go without. It was a learning experience. That's the other thing I tell myself, like definitely a learning experience as far as going through it. And that's why I started with the disclaimer that like my mind was not, because I'd been following Bigger Pockets and like I know I'd heard some of the red flags to watch for and stuff like that. And it's like, in hindsight, I knew they were there, or I should have seen them. I knew what to look for, and I still made some mistakes.
I mean, that's the thing is like, yes, the larger companies, they cost more, but that's because they're insured.
Yeah.
It's because they're bonded. It's because they pay workman's comp. Like all those things add up.
100%.
Funny enough, to my plumbing business, like I just, not even counting workman's comp and all that stuff, but on average, our employees' benefits is 35% of their base pay. So if they're making $50 an hour, you're at $17.50 of additional spend outside of workman's comp and insurance, gas, all that stuff, just on thetheir base pay. Actually, I did the math wrong, or no, I think that's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to add that. So if they're $40, at $15 or whatever. So like you don't recognize that, but that's, I'm gonna make $40 an hour. Well, you're really making $55 an hour,
Mm-hmm.
when you count in all the benefits. So
Right.
all that stuff adds up. That when you get the smaller guy, he's just looking at, I want to make $50 an hour, $40 an hour. So they don't factor in all that other crap. So
Exactly.
my little tangent there.
Oh yeah. And again, lesson learned, and now, yeah, I won't make the mistake again.
Yeah.
I better not make the mistake again.
Yeah. Well, and that's where real estate's forgiving is you make the mistakes and you know what to look for the next time.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's so forgiving, you're still going to make a killing on this property. And it stinks in the meantime, having that money tied up. Like you said, changing your mindset around it, seeing it as an asset is beneficial. But while you're going through the process of learning to be a landlord and all that stuff, obviously having extreme personal stuff going on, how are you able to balance managing your property? And, I believe you had 4 or 3 long-term tenants at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you work with keeping the tenants, deciding whether to raise the rents and whatnot while handling, personal?
Boy, a lot of learning on the fly. I probably asked you a lot of questions, and in going through, I suppose that's the deep dive of listening to stuff, just filling my head with nonstop info as much as I could. It was listening to podcasts every day, several podcasts every day about real estate and those things. And so getting an idea of like, how can I balance this? But still, it was a mess. Obviously a very stressful time in my life. And I think I'm lucky that, so yes, some things didn't go well, but overall, like I feel I was pretty lucky with the tenants that I had and stuff, even though I had one turnover. I had one and so I had to remodel too. Now, I guess that was done before the roof. So that was nice. The tenants, I think I closed early March, had a tenant that one of the long-term was out at end of March, remodeled. I think that took April. And then I had somebody I think it did take until July 1st. And he's the long-term tenant I've had ever since. And so that was before the mess of the roof, I guess. So it took care of that. So now I've got a stable tenant in, still got the short-term rental. One of them is technically mine, so I don't have to worry about my own home yet. Though I did switch that over during that time, and I had that booked within weeks. And I still have a long-term tenant in the other. So I guess some things did go smooth, I guess. The turnover from the remodel to getting a new tenant in one of the long-terms, that actually I would say went smooth. And I was happy for that. Had a good contractor that redid my floor, that did work well. That was, a great example of someone to work with, and I still work with for that reason. And so that went smooth. The changeover for my own property was probably easy, turning that to midterm rental because of how I already had my own furniture in there. So I didn't have to furnish it. It was basically laid out, and the need was there. The demand was there because traveling nursing was just, it's still a good market, I guess, but then it was booming. And so I think within 2 weeks of listing, I had someone booked for 3 months.
When you had the intentionality when you bought it. I remember the conversations of you'd like to turn it into a furnished rental, but if the tenants stay, then great. You didn't at all come in and say, I'm going to gouge them and raise their rates until they're out. So one of them decided to leave. You're like, great, my opportunity to furnish this. But I think people look at properties and they run this crazy pro forma, and then the only way their numbers work is that they kick everyone out, but they forget they're dealing with people. And especially when you're self-managing a property, it's a lot more personal to then go and just kick everyone out to make more money. Like it's, it's kind of, you got to find the balance there. And then the other thing is you had to set up a lot of systems. And so when it came to your maintenance and cleanings and stuff like that, how did you manage all that to be able to eventually, obviously FHA loan, you have to stay there for a year, but to be able to go on the road and live out of an RV and have your property looked after back home?
That was kind of, again, something I learned probably through listening podcasts, stuff like that. The idea of basically having a spreadsheet, and I do have it, even though I don't have to go to it often, but I try to have 3 options, I think. So I have 3 handymen that I can call. I've got my primary that does most things. I've got a guy that I maybe go to more for if I want flooring done, other bigger projects, we'll say. So I've got 3 options there. Cleaning, I probably have 2 options, although I say I like to have 3 in every cleaning. I've got plumbers, a list of 3 to go to. Electricians, now I think I've got a list of 3. Roofers, now I've got probably a list of 2, and
take one guy got fired.
Yeah, the one guy off the list. But so it's weird. And maybe it still took time, but it's not that hard. Now, again, I don't have as many properties, but I look and I'm like, people ask me that all the time, especially when I'm on the road. How are you managing your properties? You're never there. And I'm thinking, this is a classic thing I heard on some podcasts too. It's like, even if I lived in Omaha, I'm not driving even across town to go fix a toilet. Like that's, it's the classic, what does it work on your business, not in your business, right? That cliche statement, but it makes sense. So even if I lived across town, even if I lived a few blocks away, maybe then I would walk over, but I'm not doing those things anyway. So it doesn't matter if I'm here or if I'm halfway across the country, something comes up. It's like, hey, I call my handyman. Hey, can you take care of this? Oh, it's something else. It's like, hey, my cleaning lady, can you take care of this for me? It helps too and this is something you kind of weed out. I'm very lucky with my handyman that he has already been working on the property and has some storage. You
inherited him from.
Yes, exactly. So, and he
came with the property.
Yes. He actually rents, there's a storage unit on the underside. And so he actually rents that storage area where he stores some tools and otherwise extra fridges, stoves, stuff like that. So, and he is a jack of all trades. And so he can handle almost anything. I don't usually give him the big projects because I know he's too busy. So that's where I'll have somebody else if I want flooring, or I've done that. But he's quick, and he can handle so much. So, it's like something comes up and I call him, hey, can you go take care of this? And he does. And I think it's been very helpful. I've got pretty lucky too. And my cleaning lady, that she's also good at picking things out and letting me know about things. And it's kind of like she's the one who's on site the most too, to hey, I noticed this. Hey, I noticed this. And she keeps me in the loop too. So she's really helpful too.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing with short-term and midterm is your team.
Yes.
You have to have a good team. And if you don't, it's going to cost you money.
Right. And stress and time and everything else, right? Yes, definitely.
Well, and I think it's one of the things Brandon Turner of Bigger Pockets talked about was he was not handy, but he had, tools, and he would go and try and do these things, which was not his highest and best use. And so he had to get rid of all his tools. So he physically cannot go to a property and fix these things. And by you having to go virtual, not having to, but choosing to go virtual, it one solidified the path in life that you want, which is the freedom to be able to move wherever you want, whenever you want. But also it forced you to treat it like a business and not just like a solo shop where you're like, yeah, I mean, $200 to hire a plumber, I'll just go do that. And then maybe it takes you 6 hours to figure out what a plumber can do in half an hour. But you running it like a business, it forces you to find who, not how.
Right.
And so I think that's a huge breaking point, because then you're learning how to put all these systems in place, and the sky's the limit. You could do this with 8 properties, 10 properties, 15 properties, because you're building systems around it.
Right. And then
you have thresholds at every point, but still.
Exactly. It made it that much easier for the Texas house, which that one I signed the papers for my Texas house. I lived in the Austin area for like 6 months, I think, at that point, and knew I wanted to find them property there. But I had left. I signed the closing for the Texas property in the state of New York. Mm. And that was completely sight unseen. And that was, that was new. Had the realtor like send me videos and everything like that, and just really fill me in on the property. So I utilized him as much as possible. And he knew that, he knows I'm not around right now, so he's got to help me out. And then what you said is, I already had systems that I was used to how this works with the Omaha property. So that part was already, I guess, easy, or I already knew that process. Yes, exactly. It was a little different, of course, closing from a distance. Scary, of course. I'd do it again, though. I mean, it worked out really, really well. But that was, yeah, like you said, copy and paste. It was just repeat the process, and same thing. It's just I have a great cleaning crew. I have a friend nearby that helps me out, keeps an eye on the property. I found an amazing general contractor that helped me turn the rooms over, and he's essentially a handyman too. They'll do little projects, big projects. He's amazing. So there are times when I look and I think, yes, I've had bad experiences, but I've also feel very blessed for some of the people that I have on my team now too, that I'm like so grateful for, because they are amazing.
Yeah. Sounds like you have a good team. I mean, obviously you probably couldn't be where you are now if you didn't. So.
Right. Or I'd be stressed the whole time and I wouldn't enjoy the traveling that I'm doing. And that's the thing. It's like you said, paying someone, it's so much easier to get things into place so that I can truly enjoy where I'm at and be present where I'm at, and not be my mind somewhere else. That happens occasionally. Stuff comes up, and I've had that before. Like I'm doing this hike and there's something going on and I'm not present. And I really do not like that. I really hate knowing I'm like in a situation and I'm not fully present because something else is going on. And so that's the thing. It's like, okay, what can I do to make this right so that this happens as little as possible, or when it does happen, it's easy to fix. And that just comes with time and experience too. Realizing that, cliche statement again too, that every challenge is an opportunity too, right? To learn from this and how to fix this and how to.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
So you start talking about your sister a little bit and UNMC, and I take it she got sick while you were in the process of buying, or shortly thereafter?
Shortly after,
okay.
Right. Closed beginning of March. June 9th, my sister gets, she got admitted and basically found a large mass in her abdomen, got sent to UNMC, and ended up getting diagnosed with a sarcoma cancer. Pretty rare cancer, usually not aggressive. And that was obviously below. This is my younger sister, who's 30 at the time. And it was awful, as anyone who's known someone personally that's had cancer. And that the thought was, well, we'll remove this mass and she'll be better and we'll recheck in 3 months, and they do surgery, remove a mass, and they check again. I forget what happened. They had to check again or do another surgery a week later. Actually, I think it was 6 days, and the mass had already grown back. Now it was like cantaloupe size when they removed it, and it had already, forget it, 6 centimeters or something. But in 6 days, there was already a small mass again. That changed everything. It went from this is normally not aggressive. And, a recheck in 3 months to it's like, now we had to look at chemo and all these other things. So that was an awful 3 months, 6 months of life. She was diagnosed June 9th, and she ended up dying on December 7th, and spent 122 of her 180 days in the hospital in those 6 months. And it was a blessing again for me with my job. Like, I just gotten this job, and it's a 100% remote job. And I am, to this day, I try to remember to tell my supervisor how grateful I am for them, because I was able to take so much time off to be with her. And it's, again, awful, but yet at the same time a blessing that I could do that. And I'm so grateful for that time I had. So I probably worked, for her last 3 months, I probably worked 10 hours a week over that time. And I was at the hospital every day and got to spend time with her. And it is an experience that taught me a lot of things as well, like everything can. We talk about real estate, and we talk about like building wealth and those things. And certainly one of those right in my face examples of the biggest wealth is your family and love and those things, and your faith and being together. And I think that showed through in that, I grew up, we didn't have a lot of money, but we were together and we spent time together. And I saw my parents. My mom was a teacher, so she was home whenever I was home, basically. And I kind of got brought up that way. And I realized, instead of this potentially tearing us apart, we actually grew closer through that. And that was a big example. And it's ironic for me, because my mind ties into this, the fact that, I don't want to go too much into detail on this, but I was in a relationship that I got out the day I closed. Literally the day, I think actually, that we got the verbal, with someone who it didn't work. And it didn't work because we had different worldviews. And one of the big differences is how we looked at money. And a very ironic lesson, I think, from God, that, money would not have saved my sister. But what did, you could say, save my family, or did help us get through it, was the love that we shared. And that was from a source of where, again, growing up, we never had that much money. My parents never had much money. So it was a big, again, learning experience, lesson learned, life lesson for sure in that regard.
How did that change your life? Like, moving forward, I'm going to speculate here. I know you drove up today, and you're in an RV, that you drive around the country and stuff like that. Did that have anything to do with where you're at now in life?
For sure. And the RV idea and the traveling did come before my sister even got sick. Probably it was, I think, got the job in March. I think I bought the first RV in May. And in June, I was actually literally expecting in a couple weeks to go out on my first travels. And then she got sick. And so I pushed that back. So I had already had that idea that I wanted to travel the country and see the country. But then it was that much more of, no surprise again, it was that much more of like, life's short, right? And I could get diagnosed tomorrow with cancer and then have only 6 months left. So I'm not a big fan of the YOLO term, but it was a little bit of like take advantage for all that God has given me now and what's right in front of me. And so it was that much more of a reason. So the idea was there, but that amplified that urge and that goal to get out. And I mean, big differences now too that I've seen are, people ask me like, oh, what's your plan? How long are you going to do this and that? And a big change for me has been, I don't worry about the future, because I don't know if it's going to be there. And so I plan as much as I have to, but like, I've never been a big like 5-year plan, 10-year plan person. I like the idea of having vague goals, but I don't put set goals, and I don't do this like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this, because I don't know that day will be here. So I'm a very like day-to-day person and enjoy that day for all it can be. and again, I say this all with a caveat, there has to be a balance. You can't completely throw all goals to the wind, like with real estate. And yeah, I have some vague goals about what I want to do, but they're flexible. And I also they're not so set in stone that if I don't, like this goal doesn't get hit, that life's over. Because they're not my highest priority. They're not my highest goal. Like my faith in God is my highest goal, and the other things fall below that. So that's the center, and everything's built around that. But that's a big thing. And I just was talking to a friend the other day too, and about like, he asked me that very question about where I'm going to go. And before I even had to say it, he knew that he's like, I know maybe you don't know the answer to that, because he knew from my sister that I had learned that experience too, that it's going to be one day at a time and take it then, and I'll figure things out because things can change.
I agree wholeheartedly, especially like what's your goal thing. I've said it time and time here, and I haven't finished parsing through everything as far as what I believe in goals and stuff, but I'm more of a North Star guiding principle type person. Like, put something out there that's not achievable, like a principle or a mantra, or whatever, a core value that you're striving towards, and it's unattainable, but everything you do in life goes towards those things. Versus goals, like my North Star is to invest and provide as much as I can for my family. Like, that's not, I'm gonna have 100 units or in cash flow this. Like, I bringing faith into it. I've never read a Bible verse that's like, this was my goal, and this is how I, set KPIs to it, and how I got there. So it's kind of like, just go about life with guiding principles that guide you there, and eventually you'll get where you're going. So,
and if you found too in your experience, like if you set that goal, I'm trying to think of an analogy of how everything falls into place the way it's, I guess you could say, supposed to.
Yeah.
Like if you set that goal, or that, like you said, that mantra, or however you want to look at it, it's almost as if the world then manifests itself.
The whole thing about works-based faith, right? And how you can't earn your way into heaven. That price has already been paid. And I think the same way about, using that North Star to live a life worthy. And I've seen so many animations of just like, when we get to that gate, it's like envisioning a bouncer, right? And the bouncer is saying like, why do you think you should get in? And the people are like, oh, I did this. I saved children. I did all this stuff. I'm like, no, sorry. And when you get to the gate and say, oh, I'm with him, and Jesus is standing inside, like, that is the life that I want to remember. And why, like, if that is true, which we know it is, then why live a worthy life? It's like, well, so when you have that first conversation with Jesus, you say, I tried my best. Like, I tried to live like you. I tried, to live a life of purpose, and not just, I hate to crap on Catholics, but where they're like, go gamble and cheat and steal all week and then come back and repent. Yep. He's got me. I don't think that's what it's meant to be.
I don't think that's what it's supposed to be either in the Catholic religion.
I don't think so.
Right.
But
I think
in a dramatic sense.
I just think any religion says that, like, well, I'm saved. I got baptized.
Mm-hmm. I'm forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just
I'm saying that as the ultimate extreme opposite.
Yeah. I mean, it's
right.
the same thing. Like, people will be like, well, God knows my heart. He also knows your potential. Like,
who was it that said that? It's David Goggins. He's like, I don't want to get to heaven one day and have God show me this is the version of you that you could have been.
Yep.
Like that gives me chills.
Yeah, you're right. And I've heard him say that too, and that eats at him. Exactly. And now it's you just made me think of so many things that I've been listening to recently too, about the idea that, Christianity is the only religion where, I think this was John Lennox too, it's like, if you draw a line, most religions, it's like you're born, and then this is your life, and then there's an arrow to heaven or an arrow to hell, or whatever is not heaven or whatever. And it's like, and this is the point where the decision's made. Christianity is the only one where the decision is made here
Mm.
before you get to that end. And now you get to live knowing that it's heaven.
Mhm.
Like it's just this route, but it's the only religion, which is also one of those words like hard to use sometimes, where it's like, you know, that from the start. And that's where, as I mentioned earlier too, that's where I think you're mentioning this too, that like that sense of freedom, because I already know, so I can live, like you said, it's not works. Timothy Keller has a really good book, Reason for God, because I always think about ways of thinking the idea that it's not about my works, but you do it because you're saved. And this, I kind of had a year ago or so moment too, where I had this, ironically, like come to Jesus thought too of like, okay, if I really believe what I believe, then what am I doing not making that the center of my life? If I truly believe in a God that was willing to send his son to die for my sins in a horrible fashion so that I am saved, if I truly believe that, then what are you doing not living to honor, you know, that sacrifice and that love? And I mean, this is just how I envision it, but to do otherwise, like you said, to consciously go out and sin after that, for me is like, I literally envision like looking up at the cross and spitting on Jesus.
Mm.
Like, you're doing this for me, but I'm going to go make this choice because it's what I want to do. It feels good in the moment and this and that. So yeah, thanks. You know, and like, that's how I see it. I'm a very visual person. And that often guides some of we all have those hedonic urges, right? Like those in the moment whims, like where you want to do it. And I'm like, no, like God knows my heart, right? Like, and he knows what I'm going to do here. And like what he did for me, how can I not want to glorify him? So it's the acts of like doing it to glorify him in thanks for what he's already given us that we don't deserve, right?
Mm.
And I know Keller uses the analogy of it's like when you first get into a relationship, like when you're in love that first time, think about how you don't even have to be asked to do things. You're proactively, like maybe as guys, we're like proactively like cleaning stuff up and maybe taking the trash out. We're like setting things up. We're proactively doing these things. That's what it should be like. It should, and then should always stay now, right? It's so hard to do that. It's hard to do that in relationships and marriage, but like our ultimate relationship with God, that's how it should be. It's like, we're so grateful and so in love with him because what he's already done for us and his love for us. We want to do these things for him, not because we have to.
Mm.
Yeah, that's good. One thing I want to ask you about, so you're talking about living in the RV life. So kind of unpack that. What's that look like? You know, talk about traveling around, seeing all the beautiful things God's given us.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically, I guess, as a whole, I just like to hear about it. But specifically, how do you go about living life so you don't really have community?
Right.
You don't have a church.
Right.
So how's that work into the life of RVing from that
Sure.
standpoint?
Sure. That's a really good point too. So I'll disclaimer that with, I'm someone who has, even into childhood, I played a lot by myself. I've never minded being alone. So I always bring that up first because people ask me, you don't have a pet or anything? I'm like, no, and it doesn't bother me one bit. So all my life, and I say even back to childhood, I love to play outside. My sister really didn't. So I played outside by myself all the time. I spent a lot of time by myself. So I'm used to that and it doesn't bother me to start. But then, and you're right, like I work a remote job. I have phone calls, but I don't see somebody. So my community usually comes through, well, so I enjoy the gym. So when I go to the gym there, that's kind of, you know, I'll meet people, talk to people there. That's kind of my bit of a community, but that's always changing. So, you know, especially sometimes when I'm traveling and I'm literally bouncing somewhere every week, then it's like I don't have a lot of time to establish much. But when I've stayed places, then I can more. Church is very interesting. I have found, which is, again, no brainer. When I first started traveling, what I would often do is watch something online because I don't know the churches and this and that. That's fine, but that's I don't want to call it, I was going to say a shallow version because you're not getting the community. I have found now that I will usually make a much more significant effort, unless I'm truly in the middle of nowhere, to find a nearby church and go. And that has been amazing. So like I was in Arizona and I was in Sedona for about a month, and I went to the church there, and it was great because it was like I would go to church, and then I ended up spending like the three or four times I went, like half an hour or more each time talking to people in the congregation afterwards. So again, no surprise, finding a church has been my easiest way to plug into a community, especially if I'm in somewhere longer. Then it's really great. Like if I'm somewhere like Sedona, where I was for a month, and I can go several times, it's that much better. But even if I'm bouncing, I'll go. I stopped in a church in Asheville once, North Carolina, I remember, and went, and they had Bible study after. And I just asked them, I was like, can I join you? And they're like, yeah, sure. Who's going to say no, right? And so that was great. And then same thing. It's like Bible study with them, spent probably an hour after Bible study talking with people. So it is a huge way to plug in. And outside of that, otherwise I make more phone calls, than maybe I used to do. More calls to family to keep them up to date, which is fun anyway. It's, staying in touch with my mom, which that's something after my sister and my mom, like they were best friends. So that's a void for her that I'm trying to help fill more of too by, it used to be I would talk every once a month, maybe every couple of weeks. Now it's like it's a pretty steady goal that like every Monday or Tuesday after the weekend that I try to check in and see how they're doing. And that's a big part of it too. So still not going to be as plugged in as if I was in a place, one spot all the time, but those are my little ways. I would say personal contact is the gym, and then going to church, which has been a huge help as far as staying plugged in more.
How do you determine where you're going next? Are you just float wherever you feel like?
That's what was my question is going to be.
I have a vague goal each time, each adventure I go on, I have a vague goal, because then, and I guess maybe I'll bring this up too, like when I'm back like now. So when I'm traveling, it's all about experiences and seeing things. But when I'm back, like it is all about relationships. So I'm trying to spend as much as my time when I'm back on the relationships that I have, because that's, again, I'm not going to get that when I'm on the road. So I'll always have vague ideas of where I'm going. Sometimes it's pretty planned out. So I'm trying to remember my timelines anymore. A couple of years ago, I wanted to get to Maine and see Maine, and I left in July. And so I was like, okay, what route do I want to take there? So I just went through Wisconsin, UP and Michigan, down Niagara, through New York, Vermont, Hampshire, up to Maine. And then I bought the house. So then I had to head to Texas. There's always, one of the other trips was like, my first one was to see Glacier and Teton National Park. Maybe that's where the simple answer to your question is national parks. There we go. That's the simplest answer to your question. Is the places I want to see are not cities. Now, don't get me wrong, like Boston was amazing. I love seeing Boston, Philly. I love history, and cities are okay. Not my goal. My goal is like national parks. And it wasn't my initial goal when I started doing this to see all of them, but it's kind of become one. Because as my list grows, I'm like, I kind of now want to cross these all off the list. But not just to cross them off a list, but it's like now that I've gotten this far. So that's my basis. It's always, okay, based around the national parks, then figuring out a route. So it was like, that was the Northeast route. And then North Carolina I spent 2 months outside of Smoky Mountain National Park, because that's a big park and I wanted to see that. And while I'm there, I also checked out other parts of North Carolina. I did go to the coast. And so I see other parts of that area, but like that was the center of what I wanted to do.
So you just wake up and say, I'm going to drive here tomorrow, or is it, I'm going to stay here for 3 days, and on day 3, I'm going to head out? How do you gauge that?
Completely flexible. Always depends on the place. I know usually a little bit ahead of time. So as an example that I just brought up, I knew Smoky Mountain National Park was big enough to take months. So yeah, I spent last year, May and June, right outside the park, and I didn't do a trail twice. So that's a big park, and I did other stuff too, because I had the motorcycle then too. And it's just so beautiful out there that sometimes the weekend, it was a day I would just go on a ride and just go see some things. So, but it really depends. when I like was traveling to the Northeast, or the last trips that I did, it was going out to see national parks, California, and I came through Arizona. It really will depend on the area. So I often don't have a specific timeline. Like I knew I just had to be back at the beginning, or wanted to be back at the beginning of June with this last adventure. So, okay, I saw Sequoia and Yosemite, and I went to Big Sur on the coast and Death Valley. Then I came back through Arizona and I stopped. I knew I wanted to see Sedona area. Well, I thought that might be a week, maybe a couple weeks. I stayed a month because it's beautiful and there's so many trails. Throw in the fact there, the people were really nice. I found that most places too, but it was like, man, like that's one of the things. So there it was like between the church that I mentioned and the gym too. Like, man, I kind of want to go back, and I may, because like the people were also really, really nice. So it's unfair. It's a huge blessing that I don't take for granted that I can be completely flexible, because then after that, I went and I did parks that all a day. You know, I stopped at Petrified Forest. That was a couple hours. You know, and that White Sands in New Mexico was a day. You know, because they're Guadalupe, which is western part of Texas. I stopped there. Same thing. Did one hike. That was a day. I mean, it could have stayed longer, but they don't need to. So I kind of base it off of that too. Like White Sands is beautiful, but it's one of those things. I told my family this. It's not at all a take away from how beautiful it is. But once you see in a white sand dune, you've seen it.
You see forever.
Right,
too.
exactly. You like I did a hike where at a point you're just looking around, and this is no joke. I heard people get lost. Before I went there, I'm like, people really get lost? And then I got there half mile in, I'm like, okay, I see why people get lost. Because it's the same in every direction. So, you know, I didn't need to go back. And then there was another Big Bend and Palo Duro in Texas, places I stopped that, again, a day or a weekend's enough. And so but I never know for sure. So that's why, it's another reason why I never book campsites ahead of time. And why, as we were talking beforehand, why I stay in a lot of Walmarts, truck stops, or the west half of the country, dispersed camping, because you don't have to book anything. So I'm never tied to, oh, I got to be at this spot by, you know, this date to check in because I paid for that. So I also, even though it was harder on the eastern half of the country where there's not as much dispersed camping, I still then never planned ahead. And maybe that means, you know, I don't get to stay as close to a park, or I'm not right where I want to be. I got to stay 30, 40 miles away. You know, that's the sacrifice that I make to have the flexibility, the freedom to basically adjust my schedule on the fly. But
Have you been to all 48 continental states?
Not yet. I need some in the Northeast. I miss Connecticut, Delaware, Rhode Island, Maryland, because when I bought the house, I went from Maine back to Texas instead of down the East Coast like I was planning. So
I passed
one
some
day.
states. You're not missing much.
there we go.
So
take Route 1 all the way down and get through all of them.
I guess to wrap it up, what is freedom to you? Because you have obviously a different vantage point, as most people do,
Right.
living nomadically and working remotely and all that. What's freedom mean to you in this day and age?
I like that question. And I have thought about this at times. And then my answer seems to, the more I do this and the older I get to my answer.
Wiser.
Yeah, wiser. There we go. Exactly. Seems to be, and yet I still, with my response, always struggle with to think, like, when I think of the freedom that I've always tried to attain, it's, okay, how can I put myself, or the position that I can be in where I can truly serve the North Star that we talked about that I want to serve, which that's a choice. And so it has kind of been a situation for me where, like, okay, putting myself or focusing my life in a way that I know that I have assurance. And that's where my faith comes from. And that's why I talked about that's my freedom. I already kind of mentioned that earlier, where my freedom comes from like my faith and my salvation. And like, So that is my freedom. Like, I guess that is the simplest answer. I struggle sometimes with how to put that into words, but that really has become my freedom because, again, as we've already talked about, like, everything else can fall away and I'm still at peace and I still have that freedom because of the salvation that I know through Jesus. And that really, again, is like, if I make that my center at the times, and when I truly focus on that, keep that in my center, that's, man, the freedom and the peace from that is, undescribable almost.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Andrew, I don't know if you have any, or Andrew, Tanner.
Well, I think for me, I mean, one of the things I love about trucking is just being able to see the whole country. And, I just got back from a trip. We went out last week and got to see, Wyoming and all through Colorado. And, it's just beautiful drive. And just, looking at how long it takes to get everywhere, which, driving does get kind of boring sometimes, but I enjoy it. But also seeing how big everything is, but how close it is in the grand scheme of things. It's like, I'm a drive away from coast to coast. I can get anywhere in the country in such little time, and stopping in places like on a road trip at the Grand Canyon. Like, I could spend a week just drinking coffee, reading the Bible, looking at that view. Cause I almost fell to my knees at how beautiful it was. And I was like, this is God's creation. Like, and going on road trips and being able to see all these things, it's like, it's another form of almost meditation for me, and just be still and be one with God, and appreciate everything that he's created. And if he can create all of this, then any problem that's in my life is a needle in the infinite haystack of his creation. And so I so much admire, being able to do that. And we want to take our kids on more road trips and stuff, and just hearing how you discern that. I love to have you on another time, talk more about, how it is that you speak to God and make your decisions and peacefully, go through life. We'll touch in on the next journey, see when, kids and wife are coming along and how that affects your road trips. But,
Yep.
Appreciate your time. This was a great conversation and glad to have you on.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Pleasure
Enjoyed
meeting
it.
you.